I went to EASD, a conference all about diabetes research and innovations. It was held in Madrid, Spain, and that is where I am right now. It is basically the convention, the ADA that happens in the US, it's the one for Europe, and I saw so much. I saw prototypes of an all-in-one CGM and pump, a dual hormone pump that's currently being used by 250 people. I finally learned about one of the prettiest pumps out there, the Kaleido, and I also attended a bunch of symposiums where I learned about how this technology is advancing and helping people, whether it be the MiniMed 780G and SmartGuard, and how it could be helpful for kids under the age of 7. I learned about advancements in automated insulin systems for people who are pregnant and why it's important that they have algorithms specifically made for pregnancy. It has a lot of implications, and some incredible research showing how CGMs can prevent people with type 2 diabetes from going into the hospital. Welcome to Diabetech. I'm Justin, I have type 1 diabetes, and on here I talk all things diabetes tech, news, and management. Often episodes are interviews with other people in the industry, but today it is another solo episode. So much happened at this event. I met so many incredible people and saw so much cool technology, and I've written it all out for you, and I'm going to be telling you all about it. If you enjoy the solo episodes, let me know with a like, and in the comments, let me know what type of episodes or information you want me to do for my solo episodes. My trip to EASD was paid for and sponsored by the DDoC organization. It's this incredible group of people that brings people with diabetes to these conferences, because 5-ish years ago, people with diabetes, unless you worked in the industry, you weren't invited and you didn't have a say in all these innovations and where things are going and get to talk to these people. So they do some incredible work. I'm so thankful for being a DDoC voice. They have a saying, nothing about us without us, and I absolutely love it. Keep in mind that anything you hear on this podcast or on any of my channels or pages is not medical advice. Always consult with a physician before making changes to your healthcare. All right, let's get into it. Real quick, if you are not yet signed up for the newsletter, you should sign up for that with the link in the show notes. I've got an EASD write-up coming out on the newsletter and some breakaway articles for the devices that I saw. You won't want to miss that. Also on social media, I've already released a ton of videos checking out this technology, talking to people who are using it. You can see all of that on TikTok or Instagram at Diabebeloop_tech, Diabe_tech. Okay, let's get into this first device, and this is the Inreda dual hormone pump. I was so excited to finally see this pump in person. This is an insulin pump, or rather a dual hormone pump that uses insulin and glucagon to modulate glucose levels. The pump comes from the Netherlands, and it's currently being used by 250 people. I saw two devices, the Inreda 5 and the Inreda 6. So the 5 is the one that is currently being looked at and studied, and then the 6 is the one that's being developed and coming out for consumers. Both devices require 2 infusion sets, one that has glucagon and one that has insulin coming from it, and it also requires 2 continuous glucose monitors. The CGMs that were being used with the device are Medtronic sensors. Inreda told me that they are working to create their own sensors, but for now, those are the ones they're using. I'm not sure which ones will be part of the consumer device. As you can see, the size has gotten a lot smaller with the newer device they're working on. The one that 250 people are using right now is that transparent one that you're seeing if you're watching on YouTube, but the device they're working on now, the 6, is way smaller. It's still very large when you compare it to other pumps. It's probably about the size of maybe 2 780G Medtronic pumps. It's kind of about there, maybe a little bit smaller than that. I put some video content of it next to my AirPods on YouTube. If you're listening, you may want to go over to YouTube later just to see some of this cool content, or just go to my social media and you'll see some clips. I got a pamphlet from their booth, and here are some of the findings from the device that's currently being used. People are receiving more than 80% time in range. Again, this is fully closed loop. People aren't making decisions because you've got these 2 hormones modulating glucose levels on their own. People have more than 25 minutes per day less in hypoglycemic values compared to previous treatment, a 0.9% decrease in HbA1c compared to the previous treatment, More than 97% of the Inreda AP users achieve the recommended combined treatment goal of over 70% time in range and under 4% time below range. And users are experiencing a decrease in diabetes distress compared to their prior treatment. Inreda plans to release this pump in 2026 in the Netherlands first, and I plan on having someone from Inreda come on the show to answer all of your questions, so drop those in the comments. I've also got a bunch of questions as well. If you want to ask a question and you're listening, go over to YouTube and comment on the video. Now, we've seen other dual hormone pumps on this channel. I've talked about the iLet, but the dual hormone pump version of that. So originally the Betabionics iLet was built to be a dual hormone pump. That is still in development, but the insulin only pump is out. That same form factor is built in a way to be a dual hormone pump. So this would be significantly smaller than the Inreda pump by maybe 60%. I had Ed Damiano, the founder of Betabionics, come on the show. He's been working on this for over 20 years. And Betabionics is also looking into one infusion set or potentially maybe two tubes that are kind of next to each other in one infusion set that kind of both release their hormones. This would obviously be much more beneficial than having two infusion sets. And I know iLet, they've never said anything about two CGMs to me. So theoretically, this would also come with one CGM. I don't know how far off that device is, but if you want to learn more about it, you should totally listen to my interview with Ed, and I will put the link to that in the show notes. There's no timeline on this pump, and who knows, maybe we'll see a time when you wear two different tubeless pumps, maybe the Omnipod, and maybe they're half the size, and one has glucagon, one has insulin, and then those are doing their thing, and then maybe there's even an all-in-one CGM on one of those pumps, which actually leads me to my next pump that I saw, which was the PharmaSense CGM and pump all-in-one device. I saw a couple prototypes. So if you haven't watched my other videos, which you should, on the Nia is a tubeless insulin pump. It holds up to 300 units. It's about the size of Omnipod, but a little bit thicker, maybe a little less surface area. Their goal is for the pump to be worn for 3 to 7 days. I've done some hands-on videos and I had PharmaSense on the podcast, so go watch those videos if you're interested. They are developing an all-in-one pump and CGM, and I got to see two prototypes. So first of all, the idea of an all-in-one device is great for many reasons. One, you're changing out one device all the time, and you don't have to worry about two devices on you. You focus on the one. Another possibility is swimming. So right now, when I go swimming, I have issues with my tubeless pump and my CGM talking to each other underwater. But with an all-in-one pump, you wouldn't have that issue because they're all in one. They just talk to each other all the time. So now these two prototypes, there are two different strategies that PharmaSense has in how they're going to build this. And the two that I saw incorporated a Dexcom G6 sensor in them. They have tested it with Libre sensors as well. They say it works. These prototypes were built by PDT, Pacific Diabetes Technology. It's an Oregon startup. And so let's look at this first prototype. I've got video on YouTube. So the first prototype has a two-strand approach. This is where you have a cannula and then you also have a sensor filament, and they're separated. And you can actually in the video content see that there is like some insulin and in this case water kind of coming out of the cannula. To me, this seems like a little more of an advanced kind of system. I think that the way it works, I may be incorrect, but I think that the way it works is the first thing that happens is you put the pump on and the steel needle that it has goes in because of like a retracted piece of plastic, and then the sensor is what gets inserted in. In past videos, I've talked about how the steel needle goes in with this like retractable plastic piece. The second prototype I saw takes a different approach. Now with this one, there is just one puncture and one steel needle, but surrounding the steel needle is a CGM sensor. You can see it on this footage, like that it's wrapped around in this like sensor blanket. And the way that this would get put in, I think, is you just put the pump down and then that plastic piece would kind of retract and it would go in. and there's only one puncture site. Now, PDT has done some clinical studies for these prototypes, and they've looked into accuracy when insulin is released near a CGM sensor. That's probably the first thing that comes to people's mind is insulin in the area going to affect that? It found that if you do a large bolus, about 10 units or more, that is when the CGM sensor would read an inaccurate dilution of glucose levels, a reduction, for about 10 to 15 minutes. Below that, it is, as far as I know, they weren't seeing that issue. Now, my thoughts are that any algorithm that gets tied to this device or a device like this, it would need to understand that this is a byproduct of a device like this and work that into the algorithm. I think it is doable. If it is a consistent reaction and it can calculate based off the amount of units that were distributed and what the sensor is reading for the next 10 to 15 minutes, if it can do that, then I think that this could work. Obviously, there's a lot more work that needs to be done. PharmaSense says they also need an algorithm. They're very good with hardware, but they don't have the software yet or the algorithm to power it. PharmaSense's OG plan was to have a device that the three-line device, and the first one would be a device that just had onboard controls, no app, no connection to a CGM. I think that they may forego that and skip ahead along and have an application that connects to it. You probably want to start ahead rather than start behind. The next step for testing this prototype out is they've had the CGM electronics on the outside of the pump. The sensor is part of the pump, but the electronics are on the outside. The next step is integrating those CGM pieces, those electronics, into the pump. So that would have to be inside the pump. And once they get that going, they're going to need an AID algorithm. There is no word on timeline here, but I am excited to see where PharmaSense goes. And as I learn more, I will keep you updated here. Next up, I finally saw an insulin pump that I've wanted to see for the longest time, and it's called Kaleido. Not only does it have a cool name, but it comes in a ridiculous amount of colors. I believe there are 10 different color sets because a user gets 2 at a time, and each of the 10 color sets comes with like 2 different colors. The pump is only currently available in France, Germany, and the Netherlands. And the form factor is similar to a Tandem Mobi, which we have in the US. So what it looks like is it's this little pump that's probably about the size of AirPods, maybe takes up a little more surface area and is a little thinner than that. And then coming out of it is a little short tubing that's about 5 centimeters or 2 inches long. And it also does come with a 30 centimeter or 12-inch tube as well if you want to hold it in your pocket. One of the main ways this device is worn is by adhering to the body with like an adhesive, or rather adhesive Velcro patch that it slips onto, and then it has the little tube. The infusion set is right next to it, very similar to the Mobi. It's definitely the cutest insulin pump I've ever seen. The pumps are rechargeable, so as you're using one, you can have the other one charging. It's a proprietary charger. It's not a Qi charger, which is the same type of wireless charging we use for our phones that the Mobi uses. I'm playing footage of the pump on YouTube if you want to see it, but I also have videos on social, so you can go watch them over there. I also met a user named Nina from Germany. She walked me through all of her favorite reasons, or the reasons she went with Kaleido. That's on social, and then I've got an infusion site change coming as well. So more about Kaleido. It's a small company. There are currently 2,000 users of the pump. It was launched in 2019, went off the market in 2020, and then came back on the market in 2022. I don't know why it went off the market. If you know, let us know in the comments. Let's get into the algorithm though, right? Because that's where the real power of any pump is. Now, this pump currently is controlled with a PDM, and it uses the Diabeloop algorithm called DBL1G1. Diabeloop is working on an Android app. In fact, the app is basically finalized and they've filed for CE mark. Next up, they're working on an iOS app. So soon you will be controlling this with a phone. Their algorithms also on the Dana iPump and the Roche AccuCheck Insight. If you've used this algorithm, let us know your experience with it in the comments. And if you've used Kaleido, I'd love to hear that too. So some cool things about the algorithm is it offers actual rescue carb amounts that you'll need if you're going low. Trio does this, and some other systems out there will offer this. It's a great feature. There's also the ability to enter the time of a meal or an exercise that you're gonna have in the future. And then 6 minutes before that set time, it will notify you and let you know, hey, you're about to eat, right? Do you want a bolus for this? Love that. For meal boluses, there is the ability to put in, if you're having like a high fat meal, so like pizza and burgers, there's a high fat button. You can also have pre-programmed like amounts that you eat for different meals, so you can just like quickly tap on those if you'd like to. There's also, with exercise, the ability to choose the intensity of the workout from like low, medium, high. I love that because I find that, at least with Omnipod 5, that activity feature is quite limited because it doesn't cover all of the different types of activity I do. So I'm finding myself needing to go into manual mode when I'm working out with my system. There's also Zen mode, which takes the pump into full auto mode, and it will know that the user's not going to be logging in carbs even if they eat. They do not want to deal with diabetes. It's not like a fully closed loop system, but it basically takes control and knows that it's taking control for a short period of time. And it will send critical alerts and rescue glucose recommendations if needed. The algorithm, and I guess the Kaleido, because of the algorithm, is approved for 18 years and older. Early next year, they plan to get it for 6 years and up. There's a new algorithm version coming out, which is the DBLG2, that doesn't require meal logging. That's very exciting. So this kind of is one step toward fully closed loop for this system. They expect that to come later this year or early next, but you're still going to need to log exercises, and there are still actions that the user's gonna need to make. So this isn't fully closed loop, but a lot of systems are moving this way. And I also just recently heard about Omnipod 5's like evolution algorithm. If you don't know about it, you should go look it up. But Omnipod's, working on their next iteration. Maybe it could be that. Medtronic and Tandem are also looking into fully closed loop. So hopefully we'll be seeing fully closed loop soon. I will have more content coming on Kaleido soon on the channel. Diabeloop gave me one of their PDMs, so I'm going to be looking at that, doing a walkthrough of the system. I've got more on Kaleido coming. Diabeloop gave me a PDM that I can walk through, so I'm going to do a whole video on that. And I've also got that Kaleido in my possession that I'll also take a closer look at in that video. I also want to have someone on the podcast to talk about their experience using Kaleido and the Diabeloop algorithm. And if they've had experience with other AID systems, if you've had experience with other AID systems and you've used it, let me know. I love more, insight. The most insight I can get, the better for these episodes. So if that's you, let me know in the comments, but even better, go DM me on Instagram because it would be great to talk. Today's episode is sponsored by T1D Exchange. You can directly make an impact on diabetes healthcare, treatments, and technology by participating in the T1D Exchange registry. It starts with a simple survey about your life with T1D, and it only takes about 15 minutes. After that, you'll have a personal portal with ongoing T1D study and survey opportunities. Plus, some of these studies even offer compensation. Signing up with the link in the show notes helps support my channel, and it allows me to continue putting out free content. You can sign up at t1dexchange.org/diabetic or click that link in today's show notes. Next, I don't want to spend too much time on this. I just want to talk about it real quick. It's so exciting because we're seeing so many new CGM companies at all of these conferences. Ones that I've never seen before, including the one I saw, which was the iFree 2 CGM. It's a CGM that's coming from Taiwan, and it is so freaking small. It is this like little square CGM that is a two-piece design. There is a sensor that's put on the skin, then the transmitter goes in. Every user gets 2 transmitters, and they last 5 years each. So when it comes to waste, that's fantastic. I mean, the Dexcom G6 sensors were lasting 3 months. Many people figured out how to hack them. And it's good to see a company that's part of their business model that, we're gonna reuse for 5 years. This thing was super small, probably about the size of the Dexcom G7, maybe even smaller. All users come with a little kit. It has a charger for the transmitters. It has a little separator that helps separate the transmitter from a used sensor, the sensor you throw out. And yeah, it was just a cool device. We want to be skeptical of all these new entrants, especially when MARD doesn't have this universal way of being measured. I had a whole episode on that. If you want to learn about it, you can go check that out. It was a great conversation on the podcast. But they said that there's a MARD around 9% for this, but again, we'll know it when we see it. They are looking for CE mark right now, and they do plan to get FDA clearance as well after that. And who knows, maybe we'll see it looping with a pump at some point. I would love that. I mean, of course, what I love most about it is the fact that the transmitters are reusable, and the company said that it incorporates what's called ESG, environmental social responsibility governance. So there is a whole label, for being environmentally friendly. Now that's all I've got about actual tech that I saw, but there were a bunch of symposiums and research that came out about technology, and I want to get into that. The first thing I want to get into is this research that came out about the impact of CGMs for hospitalizations and glucose control for type 2 diabetes. Roche paid for this study, but the speaker made a joke about how all CGM companies should thank them because this data is gonna just show more, like, why everyone should get CGMs, and it's gonna help out all their businesses. This study was done in the US, and it found that CGMs used in outpatient situations are associated with significant reductions in hospitalization, and glycemic control outcomes are better for people with type 2 diabetes. We also should look at this with type 1. Let's get into this study. So the participants were found in this Optum's de-identified electronic medical record that had over 79 million people. So they had these records of 80 million people that they could go through, and they found 75,000 CGM users that met the inclusion criteria for analysis. 30% of them were accounted by ethnic minorities. The CGM data was acquired between July 2019 and January 2022. And they went back 6 months before that period and 360 days after that period to gain all the data. The criteria for the study was that participants had to be over 18, have type 2 diabetes, have a baseline A1C between 7 and 15%. Now, the study was designed or divided into 3 groups: non-insulin therapy group, basal insulin therapy group, and a prandial insulin therapy or an intensive insulin therapy group. Kind of what people with type 1 do, insulin for basal and bolus. So the findings here were that all-cause hospitalizations were reduced, and reductions were seen at 6 months and 1 year. For the non-insulin therapy group, it was a 10% reduction. The basal insulin group was a 14% reduction, and the intensive therapy was a 22.6% reduction in all cases of hospitalization. Now, they also broke that down into related to diabetes hospitalizations. So the acute diabetes related hospitalizations, this was even higher and more astounding. So for the non-insulin therapy, 31% reduction. For the basal insulin therapy, 48% reduction, and for the intensive therapy, a 52% reduction in acute diabetes-related hospitalizations. And lastly, they looked at acute diabetes-related emergency visits. And so they found here that the non-insulin therapy group was a 30% reduction, the basal insulin group was a 28% reduction, and the intensive therapy group was a 37% reduction. So they found that the use of CGMs reduced severe hypoglycemia, as expected. So does this mean that people with type 2 diabetes should get a CGM at diagnosis? You tell me in the comments. Now, there's a second part of this. They also found that glycemic control outcomes were much better. Now, the same database was used for this information. They told us that, this group were using GLP-1s, sulfonylureas, metformin, SGLT2s, and they were on medication, but they took that into account for this. And they found that after 3 months, there was improvement, and it sustained for another 9 months. They used the same 3 subcategory groups, and between all the slides that they showed, there was a reduction of about 1% A1C for all of these groups when they were using CGM. So it sounds like people with type 2 diabetes really could benefit from a CGM, and maybe with this information, this research, that will become a reality. There was another trial for the Medtronic 780G auto mode system for kids under the age of 7. Right now, it is not cleared in auto mode for kids under 7, but this crossover trial looked at kids between the age of 2 to 6. This is not published. I wasn't allowed to take pictures of everything, but I do have some screenshots and I have some good information. This study was funded by Medtronic, and they evaluated the 780G in auto mode versus manual mode for kids 2 to 6. There were 12 centers that took part of this in Finland, Italy, Slovenia, and UK. 98 kids were involved. 96 kids wound up getting through to the end. They had to have type 1 diabetes over 6 months. They had to have a total daily dose over 6 units and an A1C under 11%. For this study, there were 2 groups. There was group A that started on the 780G and SmartGuard for 12 weeks. Then there was a 2-week period to take data. And then they went on the manual mode with suspend before low for 12 weeks. Group B did the opposite. They were on the manual mode with suspend before low, 12 weeks. Then there was the break, and then they went on SmartGuard with the 780G. The findings were pretty astounding. There was a 10% increase when it came to time and range for users on SmartGuard. But what was even more interesting was that this 10% addition was in time and tight range. That is between 70 and 140. So these kids were spending 10% more time in like the tightest of ranges. There was no increased median time in hypoglycemia. There was a decreased percentage of 0.6 in A1C, and there was no difference in total daily dose. There were no adverse hypo events, but there was one DKA event that was in the closed loop group, and that was due to a sickness. They showed that outcomes here were very similar to the CamAPS FX system, and that it seems from this that auto mode hopefully, will one day be cleared for kids 2 to 6. No timing on when that can happen, but it does seem evident, at least with these, 100 kids, that it would be a good option. Again, it's not cleared for kids under 7, but, this is a good start and hopefully it will be soon. Lastly, this takes me to research done about automated insulin systems and algorithms designed specifically for people who are pregnant and why that matters, how there are better results when that is what someone is using. So this was all revolving around CamAPS FX because that is the algorithm that is cleared for pregnancies. That system's already being used throughout the world, and it just got cleared in the US. It just needs a pump now, and the EPSOMed pump could be that. I believe they are seeking FDA clearance in the US as well. This study showed the importance of hybrid closed-loop pumps use during pregnancy, but not just that, AID systems designed for pregnancy. So of people who are pregnant with diabetes, 44% of them have type 1, 55% of them have type 2, 50% of the babies are large that come from related diabetes pregnancies. So that has major health implications. The researchers also said that they spend in the UK 4 times more money on medical legal litigation than they do on maternity health care. So in the past, they have looked at the cost savings of CGMs being used. And they found that CGMs used during pregnancy save over $24 million. And because of regulations that have been passed in the UK, 95% of pregnant women are wearing CGMs, or did in 2022. And they saw a 30% reduction of birth defects and other issues. Now, here are the findings of the algorithm for pregnancy. They say that treatment-specific closed loops have a big impact for pregnancies. CGMs have helped at the end of the 3rd trimester, but when it comes to hybrid closed loops designed for pregnancies, this helps within days of starting. By the end of the 1st trimester, there's already a minimum of 10.5% more time in very tight range glucose. That is incredible. Other benefits were that there was a 3.7 kilogram less gestational weight gain, less gestational hypertension, and the lowest rates of large birth weight babies or birth issues. So we need to really be streamlining systems that are designed for pregnancies. And in the US, like let's get a pump for the CamAPS FX, or let's have other systems on the market design algorithms for people who are pregnant, or I guess strengthen the algorithms they have so they are acceptable. They also shared this image of comparing systems between the CamAPS FX for pregnancy and other hybrid closed loop systems. They said with CamAPS FX, 1 in 2 women, 50%, meet the target range. With other hybrid closed loop systems, only 1 in 20 people are hitting that target. That is major, and this is obviously something we need to prioritize, is better algorithms for people who are pregnant or accessibility to algorithms that already exist for pregnancies. Wow, that was a lot of me talking. I hope you enjoyed it. There's so much cool stuff that was at EASD, and I will continue to go to all of these conferences. If you've got questions about anything I talked about, let me know in the comments. Go over to my social media, watch all of those clips. I've got more content coming on all of this stuff, more interviews on the podcast coming. I'm super excited about all of it. There's some really cool stuff coming, and I'm really hopeful for the future of diabetes. I'll be putting out some written work on the newsletter on all of this, so make sure you subscribe to that in the show notes. Subscribe to this channel if you want to see more videos like this. I've got my podcast on Mondays and videos on Fridays, and give this video a like if you enjoyed it so other people can find it. I'm Justin, and I'll see you next week.